that means it's bug season. Heck, who am I kidding? It's always bug season in Texas. And that's why you need Grandeur Pest Solutions in your corner. They're locally owned and operated. They're trained, they're trustworthy, and they have a proven record as they have been in business for almost 10 years. They provide pest control against ants, bed bugs, bees, roaches, fleas, wasps, mosquitoes, rodents, spiders. If it crawls and you don't like it, they're probably going to take care of it for you. Now, they serve all of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're locally owned. These two guys have been running this business since 2013, and every year they get bigger and bigger. But you know what they still do? They still have great customer service. In fact, if you get a hold of them, they're usually going to have your quote and your job ready to go within 48 hours. That's pretty good. Now, you can call them for a free estimate at 469-809-1769. You can find them online at Grandeur4, that's the number 4, shore.com. You can also find them on Facebook. Just type in Grandeur Pet Solutions, and we are so happy that they're title sponsor for Outdrank the Coverage in 2023. Talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. So like and subscribe and check us out. In this series, the Outdrank the Coverage, a look back season 2, we've talked the top 5 rivals of the Dallas Cowboys, but we ended up spawning 2 other shows, the honorable mention. That's for the 70s and that's for the 90s. And there's a lot of things that match up, and there's also a lot of things that diverge from each other. And we're going to talk about all that. But first, that's intern Noe the Pro. I'm Terry Bennett. This is Outdrank the Coverage. A look back season 2, brought to you by Grandeur Pest Solutions. As we look back at the top rivals of the Dallas Cowboys. And first off, how you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. This has been fun. Like, we knew it'd be fun. We want people to want to listen to our and watch our shows 100%. By the way, the last one that's been posted on YouTube, Washington, 63,000 people. As I'm saying this, we thank you, but I also want to have fun doing this, and this has been absolutely a blast. Not only the top 5. I'll be honest with you. I think my first favorite show would be the honorable mention from the 70s. Part of that was me getting to, talk about some of the things I remembered. But also, man, when doing the research for the 90s, this is really fun to talk about. These teams that are a hot minute rival for a team, like for 1 season, 2 seasons. Oh, my God. And then they just kind of fade back into you think about San Francisco and Seattle in the early 2000 teens. How was that? 3 years? Basically, Seattle made 2 Super Bowls. They won 1, they lost 1. Then San Francisco made a Super Bowl, and they played each other. And I think all 3 of those NFC, or 2 of the 3 in the NFC title games.
2013 for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is that, that was a hot white rival for 4 years, and then it just died down. Sometimes those are the most enjoyable because they're so intense, and it's so like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and then they just kind of drift off. And a lot of that's what's happened with these. But anyway, before we get to that, intern Noe, how do you do and what do you drink?
I do good. I'm drinking Lethal Mezcal. It's 90 proof, 45% alcohol. It has that agave smell and taste to start, and it's pretty strong. But if you sip it a little bit long time, it's
love you long time.
I shouldn't have said it that way. My bad.
You meant to. It's okay. It's okay.
It's actually pretty good sipping tequila.
Yeah.
Or mezcal, sorry. How do you do, and what do you drink?
I do well, and I'm drinking Goodnight Loving. By the way, I had the mezcal earlier, 90 proof. I think it's definitely one of those that I just did 1 shot, but you need to do a couple. Gin, it reminds me of like a Mexican gin, where gin, the initial taste and the aftertaste are so different that it can kind of be jarring. But once you get used to it, it's great. And we were talking about this earlier. The thing that people don't understand, like we shot, before mezcal, and you go to a bar in Dallas or anywhere in America, you can get a shot of mezcal or a shot of tequila. In Mexico, you can shoot it, but if you shoot some of the higher mezcals and tequilas, they get downright offended.
Oh yeah, and it's not like they'll kick you out of the bar,
Oh
but
no.
they'll give you that discerning look. The quality of service might decline as far as wait time for your drink, your order. Um, so yeah, definitely respect where you're at and act accordingly.
All right. So before we get really going on, it's funny. We had to start this intro earlier because we had some technical issues. It's been a weird day all around, but we want everybody to go to our Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/outdrankthecoverage. That's where this show will go. That's where the 90s number one rival, the Philadelphia Eagles. We already recorded that one earlier, actually, because we realized, okay, people are going to watch both, but the number one one's kind of important. It's the number one. So let's only be kind of drunk for that one. And then we can be a lot of drunk for the 90s one and nobody cares. Problem is, we're not a lot of drunk. We drank, we did a show like 2 hours, ate some lunch, and we're at the age where that means it's time for bed. Like I'll see y'all tomorrow. It's almost 3 p.m. What am I doing up so late? But anyway, that's where these shows will go. That's where our bad movies and a drink shows go first. Right now, up on there is Any Given Sunday. That will be going up on YouTube next week, which I don't know why I'm saying this now. I'm used to doing live shows because Any Given Sunday will be up before this show is posted. So if you didn't know that Any Given Sunday was up on our YouTube as you're listening to this, either on Patreon or YouTube, just go to youtube.com/@L4 Media Company and find our bad movies and a drink. We've done Roadhouse. We've done Any Given Sunday. We're going to do Point Break probably as a happy hour. I knew we would have fun with those, but and the first one was really fun, but I don't know. Somewhere in that middle of Any Given Sunday, that's when I was realized this is a blast. Like I really enjoy talking Any Given Sunday with you, and just that was the whole focal point of the conversation.
Oh yeah, man, I was just looking forward to watching that music video. And
My name is Wheelie.
Will Bean
Matt Ricks.
it's just good. I mean, this is the point of us doing this show. This is what we would typically do when we're hanging out. We'll have a drink. We'll talk about anything. It could be we ventured into politics. But it mean movies, sports,
video games,
life, video games, anything really.
One of the first times we really hang out, and it sounds like we're talking like when we were teens, but this is when you were in your late 20s and I was in my 30s. You brought your N64 over. We played a little Madden, and then we played NWO WCW for like 3 hours. Like we made a whole day of that.
Yeah.
And we might do that again. In fact, we're actually going to probably talk about that game. We're going to do so. The look backs to last. If you've been following us the whole time, the look back the last 2 seasons have been Dallas centric because even though Outdrank the Coverage, I would call an NFL show. I mean, that's why you look up. And if you, by the way, if you see missing, it's just simply because those are on the table.
Mhm.
But I mean, we obviously talk all things NFL.
Yeah.
In fact, when we brought this show back was the pandemic, and lo and behold, Dak Prescott breaks his ankle, and we immediately like only talked for the Cowboys like 5 or 10 minutes each episode. We talked all the NFL. So we love the NFL, but the first 2 Outdrank the Coverages look back seasons were Cowboy centric. But next year, we've already got our topic by happenstance, by the way. Good job, Noe. What are we going to be talking about next off season? Off season, by the way, we mean football. After the Super Bowl, before August, we do at least 1 a month, usually 2 a month of these type of shows. But what's going to be our off season shows next year? Look back season 3.
Look back season 3. Famous games with names.
Name games with names. You name them, I game them. That means like the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's another point of, that could be one whole episode. Name games that have the same name. Which was the better game? You got the Doug Flutie Hail Mary. You got the original Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Now, the Aaron Rodgers one has a different name, so I'm just strictly going on.
Hail Murray.
Ooh, Hail Murray could be there against Buffalo. Wasn't that against Buffalo? Yeah, it's against Buffalo.
Yep.
Wow, I just realized. So Buffalo, in a 3-year window, has given up some of the, oh my God, how did they catch that moment? Of course, Jordan. Of course, Minnesota and Jefferson, which I still contend might be the greatest catch in NFL history. That might have surpassed the Odell Beckham Jr. one-handed catch and things like that. And if people don't know, just type in Jefferson, Vikings, Bills catch. Was it 4th and 22?
It was something ridiculous. I know they were trailed by 17 or 18.
Yeah, and they came back, and even then you thought the game was over. That's also the game if you remember, I know we're talking Cowboys 90s. We'll get there. That's also the game that they had the game won and they fumbled the ball.
And at the end, like at the 1 yard line or the goal line.
So I'm going to say this once again. How does Josh Allen and the Bills get so much passes, and then Dak and the Cowboys, when they lose like that, everybody just brings the house on them? This is why they can't win. This is why they're losers. Jerry Jones, Dak Prescott. And then the Bills, like there's at least 3 losses a year that you're just like, how did y'all lose that game?
Oh, man, it all has to do with the color of the jersey.
Oh, I like that. I like where you went. Well, I mean, but they're both blue, but they're different blue. Not all blues are the same. Just saying. But no, that is. Anyway, I'm sorry. Let's start over. All right. So anyway, here we go now. Let's talk 90s honorable mention for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the one thing that I find unique about this is when you look at this and you look at the 70s, we did a 70s honorable mention. It's on here. Some of the teams are the same. The Cardinals, now they're Arizona. They were Phoenix. They were St. Louis in the 70s. The Steelers, the Vikings, the Oilers. They're all on the list from before. But the thing that I see the biggest thing is when you go and look at the 70s honorable mention rivals, they were there for the whole 70s for the most part. In fact, they really all were. This one, it's different. There is a distinct dividing line. Now, Cardinals kind of cross over. The Vikings a little bit, but everybody else, it's like the Steelers, the Bills, the Lions are dynasty Cowboys. The rest are either a little bit of both or just the bottom half of the decade for the Cowboys, where they were still making the playoffs, but they weren't winning.
Yeah, and there's a reason why we're doing these shows.
Because I forced you to.
Well, for this one you did, but
it was a good idea.
The 71 was more obvious.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It made perfect sense to have the Vikings and the Rams just because those were the 3 dominant teams of the 70s. The 90s, I was initially hesitant to do. I didn't really want to do this show initially, and then Terry asked me to think about it.
And I told him to look at the contract.
Yeah, look at the contract. So since I was forced to do it, then I started thinking about it some more just to justify it. And lo and behold, I kept responding to him. I was like, oh, well, you can't forget.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
I was like, oh, man, because it was like maybe 3 teams initially, and then we just kept adding Detroit, and he had Houston, and I added Carolina. It's
and to be fair, Carolina, of course, 96 playoff game, but Carolina also kind of drifts into the early 2000s.
It does,
and you could make the case that Detroit starts in the early 90s, dies, but then there is we can even go back to the 2014 playoff game. There is a 6 or 7 year period where it felt like Detroit and Dallas were playing every year. It was going to be an amazing game. One of the teams was going to win in the last 20 or 30 seconds.
Yeah, especially in the 2000s and maybe in the early 2010s. I guess just because of how the standings resulted in the next season. We were third in our division. We're going to play the third place NFC North team in the following season. It just so happened to be the Lions. So that kind of kept happening over and over again. I still remember the 06 season finale. It was a meaningless game. Detroit was 2-13. They came into Dallas. Dallas was 9-6. Their playoff position was secured. Detroit, it was a back and forth barn burner. It was like 39-36 Detroit. It was a high scoring game. I remember games like that. I remember the Stafford.
That's what started the there was a little bit of drama. Do you remember that's the next year, or excuse me, at Super Bowl Row? John Kitna is talking, and somebody just brought up the Cowboys and their defense, and he basically said, we just knew to key off Brady James. If we threw the ball around Brady James, he wasn't a coverage linebacker.
And that's when it kind of realized to other teams that Brady James, just like with Roy Williams a few years before, could not defend the pass.
And Brady James had a really solid career with Dallas, and he had a lot of good games, but Brady James was good in the run stop.
Yeah.
He was one of the better run tackle linebackers of that era, but you were getting in that time where you needed to be able to do both. And that's, again, I love Bill Parcells, and for the most part, I loved his time with Dallas, but he was still using some antiquated, it's, play it like it's 1986 instead of like it's 2006.
Yeah, and there were games where Dallas would lose, and Dallas should have won. I still go back to the '05 Seattle game, that team that made the Super Bowl. We go into the locker room tied. Parcells starts to park the bus and play just defensive only football, and we end up losing. And it was an ugly game, but it just showed that Dallas could compete with the best teams in the NFL. It's just our head coach was hampering us.
Yep. All right. So let's start it off. And
let's go back to the 90s.
Let's go back to the 90s. And now, so what we're going to do, and if you watch the 70s show, we do this. We're going to talk the whole rivalry of the decade, but I'm only just showing one game. And so the game I'm actually showing is the 1991 Cowboy Houston Oilers game that went into overtime. Houston ended up winning it late, but this was one of those games because this was a good Houston team, and this is a Houston team that they thought they were building for a Super Bowl, and this kind of showed you as a Dallas fan, like, okay, Dallas is getting in the right world. They go into Houston and they play and this was when Houston was really hard to beat at home. And so it sucked that they lost, but you kind of realize, hey, this Dallas team's on the right path.
So 1991 is a year I always look back at because I'm always wondering how the Washington team went from one of the greatest teams of all time.
That's such a big thing for you. I love it.
Because in a 2-year period, they went from just unstoppable. Like I can't think of another team ever that could have beat that team. To 93, Gibbs retired. They're old all of a sudden, and they can't play anymore. But as I was looking at the 91 team, I started noticing teams like Chicago, teams like Houston, teams like New Orleans. They were like unsung teams that season. They all had great seasons, but one thing or another led them to going from, 8-1 to 11-5, 12-4, and not being the 1 seed. Houston was a really good team in 91. They probably gave Washington their outside of Dallas, probably gave Washington the toughest matchup that season. And, this is a team that was 2 years away from team turmoil.
That'll be a look back one day.
Yeah. But yeah, this was a really, really good team. And they were that team that was known for making the playoffs every year. At this point, them and I believe the Chiefs, I'm mistaken, or like just being competitive every year. But I think from 87 till now, Houston had made the playoffs every year. And this was kind of a year they kind of broke out. They had a strong start to the season. Very tough to beat this run and shoot offense. This was an offense that kind of gave the Cowboys fits. And you've mentioned in person and on air, if in 92 they don't allow that big comeback to the Bills and they run the table in a weak AFC and make it to the Super Bowl, they probably could have given the Cowboys a lot, or they probably would have beaten the Cowboys.
Unless Dallas was able to do what the Giants did against the Bills, and that's their Super Bowl where they literally kept the ball for 90% of the game.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, and I'm not saying he was bad, don't get me wrong, folks, but a lot of people talk about Bill Belichick's defense in that Super Bowl. But if you go back and look, Buffalo moved the ball at will on the Giants. They just didn't have the ball for a long time because that Giants offense and Otis Anderson, played keep away. But yeah, so at this point, Dallas would end up losing in the playoffs to a run and shoot team in Denver. Detroit, and get beat pretty bad. As you said, that was kind of their kryptonite until they were able to get Charles Haley and solidify the pass rush. And then everything changes for Dallas. They also played in 94. Dallas wins 20-17, but that almost was a win for Houston because in 94, Houston had fired the coach, had tore it down. They had started Cody Carlson. He was absolutely terrible. Yep. Cody Carlson was the typical played good in spurts, but if you gave him the starting reins, he just wasn't consistent enough. Yep. And Bucky Richardson, the Aggie, is playing, and he is terrible. But man, if he didn't know how to just scramble, if he needed 9, he got 10. If he needed 20, he got 21. And Dallas, honestly, and also this was Barry Switzer Cowboys. So, and this was early Barry Switzer, but still, you were going to get compared. And they barely beat the Oilers, and they lose the very next week to the Detroit Lions in a great game in overtime. And this kind of started the whole can Barry do it for the Cowboys.
Let me go back real quick to the '90s Giants. You talk about people loving Belichick's play calling in that game. It really is Ron Earhart. They really should have kept his play calling on offense in the Hall of Fame, not Belichick's defensive play calling, because
that's a good point. I don't know why. I mean, I get why, perception and all, but like
you kept the ball away from the Bills for over 40 minutes. I think that's more attributable to the offense than it is to Belichick and the defense. But anyway, fast forward to 94. We're talking about the 2017 Cowboy win early in the year. I didn't know what to think with Barry Switzer because you remember me growing up. I was 9 years old I was 10 years old at this point. I knew nothing of college football prior to 93, 92. So I didn't know anything about Barry Switzer. I just heard he was a famous college coach. So just him coming in, I'm thinking, okay, he doesn't really have any experience in the NFL. Not even thinking that Jimmy Johnson didn't either 5 seasons ago.
That's a good point.
But I was like, well, this team is still really talented. Maybe you could just have a figurehead there, let the players run the asylum, and we'll be good. And for the most part in 94, that's kind of what happened. But yeah, in this one game against Houston in 94, I still think they had Gary Brown at the time. And he had 1,000 yards in half a season with Houston the season prior. So he was still their lead back. But man, this was one of the most frustrating wins for this entire season for the Cowboys. This is probably, you and I probably agree, this is probably the best version of the Cowboys in the 90s. And this is the season they even win the Super Bowl. But yeah, Bucky Richardson, former Aggie, running quarterback, essentially.
And they just did every little thing they needed to do. And again, Dallas ended up winning.
Bucky Richardson threw 42 times in this game, too. Crazy.
Yeah, it wasn't like, what did he end up with, like 220 yards?
242. Good guess.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Again, this wasn't what Houston was doing right. It's basically every 3 plays, the Dallas defense would just make that little mistake. And you got to give Houston credit. They found that mistake. There are many times you'll see a defense have a great game and they'll stat out wise and point out wise, but then you go watch the film and you go, dude, if that quarterback would have seen like 6 things different, it's a different game. This was one of those games where the defense played well for Dallas, but Houston, every weakness Dallas did on a play, Houston seemed to find it.
Yeah.
And it just got frustrating. And then, of course, you say the top Oiler win is 26-23, this one that we're showing. I think the 97 one is a big one because, hey, that kind of basically knocked Dallas out of the playoffs in 97. They were never going to make the playoffs after. Look, 97 was just the one thing. It's funny because Jerry Jones always says he wish he wouldn't have fired Chan Gailey so early, and I agree with that. He should have fired Switzer after 96. He should have been like, dude, you know what? Thank you. You took us to a title game. You won us a Super Bowl, and you bowed out on the road in the playoffs. There's nothing wrong with that. Respect. Now go to the couch. And then hired somebody. But they tried 97. Switzer, the whole gun thing, he got arrested. The team, basically had just lost everything.
Yeah.
You know what and let's see if we're on the same wavelength. What would be the favorite Cowboy game in 1997 that they won that they probably shouldn't have, but it was so fun to watch, mainly because of what the other team did?
Oh, I have to go to 97. I just remember the one game I went to in 97.
That's right. You went to a game in 97.
It was our last win against Washington. It was kind of a last day because they had to drive.
I'm sorry. I'm 1 year off on what I was talking about. I was talking about, I guess, 96. Was it 96?
You have to tell me what game.
Cincinnati.
Let's
what
see.
Year
so
was
since
that?
so it'd be 94, 97. The
Jeff
Blake game?
Yes.
That would have been 94.
Was it 94?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because they started the year off against Pittsburgh, which, by the way, that was the first year they did that. That was the first year that they did the the one division plays the other division.
Yeah.
And you're right, it was. That could have been.
So 97, Boomer Esiason was back for his final season, but he played the end of the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, 94, I think Klingler was hurt. I think he was still on the team, but Klingler was hurt, and they put in Jeff Blake.
Beautiful bomb, Blake.
Yeah, and that he was known for the best deep bomb in football because the way he threw it, when it came down, it didn't come down at an angle. It almost just came down like vertical drop.
Yep.
So it was almost impossible for the defender to even get an interception. It was either his guy was going to catch it or it's going to be incomplete.
Yeah, and that was a game where he hit Carl Pickens for a couple big plays. Nobody ever remembers, speaking of the Lions, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You know, this is the same year they lost in that overtime game. Nobody ever talks about the fact that, you know, Dallas after that won like 5 or 6 in a row. Then that Niners game, and then they won 3 in a row. And then that Cleveland Brown game where Jay Novacek looks like he's running in for the game-winning touchdown. He just slips.
Yeah.
And then they lost the Giants on the road. But anyway, I don't know where we're going there. So anyway, and also this kind of continued the best of Texas. This was outside of 1979. This was the best teams to play each other with these two programs.
Oh, yeah, because Houston, after 1980, they kind of fell off.
Hey, watch this. He's going to go for the game-winning kick, and nope. You don't see that bullshit.
Yeah, Emmitt Smith had the fumble in overtime. Houston.
One of the only times Emmitt Smith
yeah.
had what you would call a game-breaking fumble.
Yeah, I say naturally reliable, and that was just one of his few gaffes in his whole career. But yeah, Houston wins in overtime in that game. It was pretty good. Both teams went on to win their divisions that season. Houston ended up losing to the Giants to end the season, and that kind of hurt them as far as seeding goes. They ended up making the playoffs. They won the wild card round, but they ended up losing at Denver on the road in a very close battle.
Well, and that's what happened to them. They got, you had the John, and that game, by the way, Houston's leading for most of the game. And then, Elway, I can't remember if it was Ricky Natil. He hit a guy over the middle and he broke like a 3rd and 9, and he got a first down. Mm-hmm. And then when they played the Chiefs in Houston, and they're playing really well, then Joe Montana did Joe Montana things. And that's why we always talk about it. Like, yeah, you can blame Houston for some of the Buffalo comeback, but you also got to tip your hat to Buffalo.
Yeah.
Like, it'd have been really easy for them. Hey, look, we had a great season. We just went to a Super Bowl or 2 Super Bowls. Hey, we lost on the division. It happens. We'll be back next year. And they responded. And I don't think people realize how many like 3rd downs in that second half that the Bills offense converted it. And that's the thing when you talk about a team collapsing, or you talk about a team that, they can't win the big one. We talk about the Cowboys now. Jordan Love has the playoff game of his life. Well, his first playoff game, but he has the game of his life. Sometimes you just have to go, okay, that's just how that works. Yeah. We just, and that's what was happening to Houston. It felt like that they just always were the 39. Sorry about that. We're matching up against teams that, you're talking about 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, first off.
Yeah. Warren Moon and Troy Aikman. Yeah.
Well, no. Yeah, but I was talking about Denver and Buffalo. Elway and then Joe Montana.
Joe Montana.
So, I mean, you think about that now in the moment. Oh, my God, you lost those games, but, well, shit, you lost 3 playoff games to 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Some strong quarterback play in the AFC, even though the whole conference as a whole was declining as far as quality went. But, yeah.
Was it?
I mean, toward the mid-90s, it was kind of declining in quality.
That'd be a good talk. Anyway, so now let's go on to the Buffalo Bills. They're our next honorable mention for the 90s rivals. This is easy. You've got the 2 Super Bowl wins back-to-back for Cowboys, but more importantly for Dallas, I've never said this to you. I don't think Emmitt Smith is back after week 2 if they beat Buffalo in week 2 of the regular season in 1993.
I would agree with that.
There's the famous Charles Haley throws his helmet through the wall, and, you got to bring Smith in. But I think more importantly, you just destroyed this team 52-17 in January. Yeah. And then in September, you're not only getting beat by them, you're getting beat 10-7. You can't move the ball. And by the way, one of the famous NFL films videos is Aikman getting hit by, I think it was Smerrick of Philadelphia or Buffalo. Always frustrate me because that's that's a late hit. Like it was a late hit back then, and it's not called. But anyway, it's one of those again. Great teams, and I say Dallas because that's who we were talking about in the series. How many times we talked about Dallas loses a game, and that turned out to be the best thing for them for that season.
Yeah, and it ended up leading them to a Super Bowl just because Jerry Jones just gave up. He didn't want to pay Emmett that much money, but he ended up realizing he was worth it. After they got destroyed by what ended up being a really terrible Washington team.
35-17.
Yeah.
Alvin Harper had the game of his life.
I don't know if they would have won with Emmett in that game.
Yeah, they would have.
Maybe the whole offensive game plan would have changed or been different, but yeah, they would have destroyed the Bills had Emmett been in this game. But yeah, it was definitely the best thing that happened for the Cowboys in '93. I think that ended up being one of the greatest seasons for a running back in NFL history. I know a lot of people will say LT in 06, Priest Holmes in 03. There's a lot of other good Sean Alexander in 05.
I think the only one that gets close is Terrell Davis's 2,000 yards because it was a Super Bowl winning team.
Yeah,
I get you and I talk about it. We overrate like quarterbacks who win Super Bowls or who don't win Super Bowls. We underrate, but if you're talking about like what's the difference between one great season and the other, and if one of them goes and not only wins a Super Bowl but wins the MVP, and you can make the case, as you said, if they play in any of the 4 losses, they probably don't lose. That's the epitome of what you call an MVP running back.
And essentially in 12 games, Emmitt Smith almost had 1,500 yards.
Yeah, what did he end up with?
I think 14 something. He barely won the rushing title.
Yeah, he had to win it on the last week. That was hang on. Wait, how did I get there? Oh yeah, hang on. That was I can't remember who it was that got hurt. Somebody got hurt in the first half and they ended up helping. But yeah. So anyway, so Buffalo, and I don't know how Buffalo fans feel about it. Like I say this, I don't mean this as a joke, but when you lose 4 in a row, how do you pick, which ones? Now, yeah, Dallas was 2 of them, but like to me, it always felt like, that giant first one was Buffalo's best chance. And I know that in the first half of the second Super Bowl with Dallas struggled. But let's remember this. Troy Aikman doesn't play in that game today.
Correct.
With his concussion. Also, that was at the time where every odd year or so, every 3 or 4 years, they scheduled the Super Bowl exactly 1 week after the conference title games, which, by the way, that should not happen.
Correct.
I want a full week and a half. I know people say, well, teams can start rusty. That's fine, but you're going to get the best of the best. As healthy as you can be. And Aikman wasn't healthy. He had the concussion against San Francisco in the middle of that game. He doesn't remember that game. He doesn't really remember the Super Bowl, and he didn't play up to Aikman's. That's the one interception he threw in the Super Bowl was in that game. And so I think that game gets put a lot closer than it really was, if that makes sense. It was the Buffalo Giants. That was the chance for Buffalo to win a Super Bowl. I don't think it changes anything else other than they would have won their first one and then lost the next 3 because there was no flukes in what Washington and Dallas did in those 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, the first, and I would even say this last one would be the best opportunity just because in the last one, they were still up at the half.
Yeah.
So if they don't just completely collapse in the second half, it could have been a whole different story. But yeah, that 90 Bills team was one of the best teams that never won a championship. They just could not figure out how to stop the Giants on offense.
Yep.
Bruce Smith he could have been a borderline MVP that season. He was just so dominant. Had the safety on Jeff Hostetler in the end zone. But yeah, they couldn't even beat a Giants. Having said all that, they couldn't even beat a Giants team with Jeff Hostetler at quarterback and not Phil Simms. So he kind of had the Nick Foles story where he kind of struggled in relief of Phil Simms and then kind of just picked it up in the playoffs. So and even then, he didn't get hot like Foles did in the conference championship game. He really didn't get hot at all.
That's a good point.
During the whole playoff run.
I mean, he didn't make a lot of mistakes. That was the big thing.
Because he didn't. That Giant team was built to where if you could just run the ball and play solid defense, that was all you really needed. They were just that good of a team.
Yep. All right. So now we're going to move on to our next one. And this is one of those You and I talk about this. We talked about it in the Eagle one. We talked about it in the Washington one. We even talked about it in the Giants ones, that when you want to be a great team, there's certain mountains you're going to have to climb, and you might not climb them immediately.
Mhm.
When you look at, Dallas against Washington in the early 90s, they climbed it, I guess 90 counts, but it really doesn't. It gave them a 1 win. But they kind of started that climb in 91, and then they finished it in 92. And then outside of a 3-game stretch that still to this day is one of the most flabbergasting, how the hell did that happen? Other than that, Dallas dominated Washington, excuse me. Same thing with the Giants. Eagles, we talked about, like, you thought, oh, they climbed that hill in 91. Oh, we got to do it in 92. Okay. Oh, we got to do it in 95. Okay, that's fine. But nobody talks about this one, and that is the Detroit Lions. This was definitely a mountain for Dallas, and not in the video we're showing. That's 94. But, Detroit took Dallas out in 91. People forget 91, Dallas upsets the Chicago Bears in Chicago.
Yeah.
And they became that, oh, we're going to see them in Washington in the NFC title game. Oh my God, this is 1982 all over again. And they go into Detroit, and Detroit doesn't just beat Dallas. They give Dallas one of their worst playoff losses of all time.
Yeah. And that was one of the games where we decided, yep, we are a player away.
Yep.
And that led to Charles Haley being signed the off season. But yeah, it was and 91 in the regular season and in the playoffs, Detroit just destroyed Dallas. It was just that matchup Dallas could not figure
run
out.
And shoot, and especially when you have the run and shoot and a great dynamic back like Barry.
Yeah.
Again, it just goes to, how did Detroit not do better?
I don't think their quality receivers in 91 was up there like with Houston was. Houston didn't have the running game that Detroit had, but Detroit didn't have the quality of receivers that Houston had. Remember, Herman Moore was a rookie this season. He was not the Herman Moore we knew later on in the 90s.
Yeah, but I'm trying to look at their roster.
That to me, that was the main issue. They had solid receivers, but they didn't have any Haywood Jeffries or even. I mean, they might have had a Curtis Duncan.
You had Herman Moore. You had
a rookie.
You had Brett Perryman.
He wasn't the Brett Perryman we knew in 95. That's what I'm saying. Like they had the guys that were just too young or just not ready yet, or a combination of both. That was the issue with Detroit in 91. They had the running game, but they didn't have the quality of receivers. As where Houston, they didn't have the quality of running backs, but they had the quality of receivers.
Yeah, I don't know. It just felt like the Lions left at least a couple more NFC title game appearances.
Well, and also they didn't have Warren Moon at quarterback either.
Yeah,
it also didn't help. They had Kramer and Pete.
And but neither one of them were terrible.
And they're terrible. They weren't Warren Moon.
Hell, Eric Kramer against the Cowboys in 91 was record breaking. Yeah, he was dominant.
He was, but again, Detroit was the Cowboys' Achilles in 91, but Washington was Detroit's Achilles in 91. Detroit started and ended the season getting blown out by Washington.
Yep.
So it was just matchups.
And at the end of the day, it's always what it is. Look at these. This is the one thing that they didn't do right back then that if they did now would look great. Well, I guess technically the Ultra Rush or whatever is kind of the same, but the uniforms for Dallas look really good. It's just with the silver helmet, it's weird because it's all white and then a silver helmet. If they had went with the white helmet with these looks, I think that's a beautiful look.
Maybe. I guess I would have had this. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you.
This game frustrated me. Not because only Dallas lost, because everybody talked about, oh my God, Barry Switzer. And Emmitt Smith had a better game.
Hey, all I'm going to say is I hate this game because of how the announcers were just
they were very and look,
in love with Barry Sanders.
And in
I wish you could have found that 2-yard loss I'm really referring to.
In 1994, I didn't understand it. Now, after doing play-by-play, I get it. You want you don't want the underdog to win because they win. You need them to be good enough to where people are like, holy crap, the underdog's still in the game. I should go check it out.
Yeah.
So I get that. But yeah, you're right. I listened to this as I was downloading this, and my God, everything. Emmitt Smith could get a 7-yard play, and then Darren Dudorf be like, I don't know what it is. The Cowboys just look off. And as you say, Barry Sanders get a 2-yard loss, and that was a 2-yard loss. But my God, Detroit beat Dallas all of front the line, and they dominated. I don't understand what happened. It's like John Smoltz with the Rangers World Series. And look, I'm a broadcaster. You're a broadcaster now, whether you want to admit it or not. I used to do games.
Yeah.
The idea of certain people talking back, like Joe Buck doesn't hate the Cowboys. Troy Aikman doesn't hate the Cowboys. They call it like they see it. But there are times, this game, John Smoltz with the whole Rangers and, by the way, his own team, Braves, the year before, World Series run, he just acts like he doesn't like the team that's winning. That's what this game felt like. And I get it. Y'all didn't like the Dallas Cowboys in 94. They'd won back-to-back. They were brash about it. But my God, take your Detroit Lion penis and put it back in your pants, please. It was annoying, dude.
The thing, like one of the major issues between the debate of who the better running back was in the 90s, like, which I don't really care. You could say it's Sanders. To me, they said they didn't have a good offensive line. And I'm thinking, no, Detroit had a really good offensive line. And I just think it wasn't highlighted because Detroit didn't have a fullback position.
That's a good point.
It was a single back run and shoot. And that's the Cowboys, they had Moose. And to me, that's one of the main reasons, because you saw how bad that they were running the ball when Emmitt Smith was not in the lineup. You saw when they rolled out Derek Lassick or Sherman Williams starting instead of Emmitt, and how bad they ended up being in that game. With a good line could still protect the quarterback, but that wasn't happening in those games. So that kind of annoyed me, that they were just praising him, saying he was such an adversity, he didn't have a fullback or what they thought was an elite offensive line. When in fact, to me, they had one of the top 10 offensive lines.
I mean, Lomas Brown should be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And then Mike Utley.
Was he the guy that paralyzed?
Yeah. He was a really good offensive lineman.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's an idea that the Lions, because they ran the run and shoot, all they did was throw for 5,000. No, they really didn't. Like you said, Eric Kramer had a really good 91.
Yep.
Rodney Peete was solid. I still feel like Scott Mitchell he gets a lot of blame when he shouldn't. If you really go back and look at the numbers, he was pretty solid. But the issue with the Lions is it's that typical. So like Dallas knew with Emmitt Smith what to do. The Lions didn't know what to do with Barry. One game he'd get 38 carries. The next game he'd get 5 carries.
Yeah.
They could just never go, hey, this is the guy we're going to stick with. We're going to go with him no matter what.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, I have no problem. I always say it like this. Barry Sanders is the most electric, fun running back in the history of the NFL. Emmitt Smith is the most complete back in the history of the NFL. They both did what they did amazing. They did different things.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, and I'm not saying it's because of what he did. I'm just saying one of them won championships. The other didn't. Probably both get some of the credit and some of the blame for that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, outside of Lomas Brown, Lions had Kevin Glover as their center. They had Doug Weidel as on the guard. So they had a really good offensive line. But yeah, I really think you shouldn't measure championships or use the character or the field or attribute of championships to determine who was great and who wasn't. I think this is an individual acknowledgement. So
you're not wrong, dude.
Leave it that way. Like Barry Sanders, you could say Barry Sanders is better than Emmitt Smith. I'm fine with that. But I still think Emmitt Smith was a complete back. Like you're saying, he could pass, he could run the ball, he could block, which is the holy trinity of what you want in a running back.
Well, hang on. So I guess something happened with the upload. So hang on real quick.
Okay.
I've got to figure this out. Dadgummit. Keep talking.
Okay. So yeah, Detroit, they ended up winning the matchups in the 90s 3-1, the 2 games in the 90s, the 94 game. Dallas's one win was in 92. This season they won their first Super Bowl of the 90s. Now it's just a blowout 37-3 win. I guess we're going to move on to the Steelers in a moment.
Yeah, we're going right here. Something happened where, again, it's been a weird day. If you don't know, we're recording this on the 19th. And if you know, it's like a lot of internet issues all over the world. Apparently, one simple update just created havoc. We've had some issues with our stream service, and so
Well, I mean, that's what happens when everybody uses one particular company
to watch us.
Yeah.
So anyway, so now let's go. We're gonna have to do it as a share, which is fine. Doesn't hurt. This is a Super Bowl.
Wait, do I not have Pittsburgh on this list?
Yeah, you do. Do you not?
I don't have Pittsburgh on this list.
Maybe that's why. I thought maybe I thought you did.
I don't even know what the 90s. I remember the 94 win.
Oh, you don't. So maybe that's what it was. I thought I pulled them because I still think I pulled them because I had them the whole time. But anyway, we're going to go Pittsburgh. And the reason we're going to go Pittsburgh is not just this one. And by the way, we're showing the, of course, 96 Super Bowl, 95 season. And, it was an ugly game. We can all admit that.
Yep.
Shouldn't have been as close as it was. I do want to point this out, though. This was after. No, it's right before. I still contend that you're about to see the best block ever by Larry Allen here coming up. Oh, no, I guess we already missed it. That was the first play of the game. But yeah, Dallas starts out big. They go up 7-0. They go up 10-0. And then they just kind of, again, it's amazing how many times you see a team win a Super Bowl and they win it the way the whole season went. The Chiefs are the same way this past year, where if they struggle, they pull it out at the end. This was the same way in 95. Dallas started strong. Very first rush play by Emmitt Smith is a touchdown against the Giants. The whole season they rolled, basically. They do the same thing early in this. Then in the season, they tailspin for a little bit. They do the same thing in this game. They figure it out to win. But this is also a big rivalry because this was the first win in the regular season for Barry Switzer. 1994. Dallas opens the season on the road in Pittsburgh, and everybody was like, oh, this is going to test Dallas. In fact, I think it was pretty much the hot pick. Pittsburgh would win. Yep. And then Dallas not only wins, but Charles Haley has 4 sacks, 3 of them in back-to-back sacks. And the Dallas Cowboys just absolutely dominate the Steelers. And then, of course, 2 years later, or a year season, but 2 seasons later, they end up playing in the Super Bowl. And I get tired of this narrative. People say, well, Pittsburgh should have won. No, Dallas shouldn't have played with their food as much as they did.
Yeah, they let the Steelers back in the second half. They let Bam Morris impose his will on
the onside kick to start the second half.
The onside kick, which...
And by the way, this game to me showed the difference in why, at least for Dallas, Norv Turner was a better offensive coordinator than Ernie Zampese. Norv Turner knew how, in that middle part of the game, when the other team has kind of figured you out, he knew how to do that little twist that would, change things up. Ernie never quite did that. He went with hey, we are the best team. We should do this. We'll win. And not ever understanding that, hey, the other team, they got good players too. And they can kind of scheme against you as well. I think that's where Norv Turner doesn't get enough credit as an offensive coordinator. He knew how to attack what was the weakness of that team.
Yeah, that's very accurate, man. It played out in this game too. Their offense just stalled in the second half while Pittsburgh's just slowly started eating at the Cowboys. The Steelers' offense really wasn't that great in this game. But,
oh, God, no.
But because they were playing with their food, as you say, the Steelers just knew that they didn't, as long as they didn't give up, there was still a shot. And yeah, they kind of proved it.
You know what Norv would have done in this game?
What would he have done?
He'd have thrown 35 times, and Aikman would have had 350 yards because you weren't running on this Steeler team a lot, not consistently. Yeah, you're going to get that first play of the game where Larry Allen kicks out Greg Lloyd perfectly, but 9 times out of 10, they were going to muck it up. If you go look at him, I know he gets 2 touchdowns, but if you go look at his stats, I think it was like 2.6 yards per carry or something like that. But they never trusted on Aikman and Irvin and Novacek and Kevin Williams, who, by the way, at this point, Kevin Williams was the hottest wide receiver in football. Yeah. Remember? He had that, of course, the Giants game, which I always talk about, but he also had the, everybody remembers the Christmas game because Emmitt Smith breaks the record, but Kevin Williams had 235 yards. I mean, he just destroyed them. And some of that was on Anise Williams.
Yep. See,
this is an era nowadays. This is, again, we go back to, we talked about earlier, I think it was in the other show, but like nowadays, if one cornerback gives up one touchdown in 16 games, people are like, oh, he's not that good. He gave up a touchdown. Dude, back in the day, Deion Sanders got scored upon.
Yeah.
Anise Williams, Hall of Famer, got scored upon. Kevin Smith, if he doesn't get hurt, would have been a Hall of Fame player, got scored upon. Eric Allen, one of our favorites. Darrell Greaves, Hall of Famer. All of them got scored upon because that's just how it works.
Yeah.
Now, for some reason, we want to be like, oh, you gave up one touchdown in 12 games. You're terrible.
Yes. I mean, social media.
Yancey Thickpen.
Slow.
Future Cowboy.
Slow, but a great. Oh, he was a future Cowboy? I thought he was a future Titan. I didn't know he played for the Cowboys.
Yeah, dude, him and Anthony Miller.
I remember Anthony Miller in 97.
Yeah, Dallas and the weird things in the late 90s. Again, this is what happens when you lose like an Alvin Harper and a Kevin Williams and Michael Irvin gets hurt. You're just scrambling, trying to, hey, he was good once. Let's bring him in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Thickpen was in the 97.
Thickpen was slow then. Like in this game, he was slow. But he was so good at just getting enough separation.
I'm just going to point out, it wasn't like Michael Irvin was Burner Turner or anything.
Excuse me? Burner Turner wasn't Burner Turner.
That's true.
We're talking about the Atlanta Falcons.
I thought he did.
Atlanta Falcons.
No, he went to camp with the Cowboys and never played. Okay, so again,
that was like 2000, 2001.
Hey, I'm going to try one more time. Yeah. But back then, though, it wasn't necessarily about speed. It was about positioning.
Yeah, and which Thickpen at this point in the mid-90s was really good.
Oh, yeah, Andre Hastings, Georgia.
Andre Hastings was one of their top receivers. Ernie Mills was another top receiver for this team.
That's who ended up playing a lot of time, like played legitimate time for the Cowboys was Ernie Mills.
Oh, yeah, he did play.
That's who I'm thinking of. That's what it was. Who
had, I think, a pretty good game here. I think so last season, when we did the look back, it was the 5 Cowboys Super Bowls, but we ended up basically doing a historical look on the Cowboys from 1960 to 1995. And we covered the final Super Bowl. And I remember us talking about Ernie Mills having a pretty solid game here.
Yeah, it was 98. Ernie Mills actually ended the season as the leading touchdown getter for the Dallas Cowboys with 4.
God.
Can you name the other 2 wide receivers in 1998? You're going to get one of them, of course, but the other
Michael Irvin,
yeah. What's the other one?
It wasn't Kevin Williams.
Oh no, this is a guy that became a big Cowboy fan favorite for a couple years.
James McKnight.
Oh no, good call, but no, that's 2006. No, this is later.
Okay,
Billy.
Davis. Billy Davis, yeah.
Billy Davis.
Oh, bright skinned Billy, yeah.
Billy Davis, and then there was the white dude that
Patrick Jeffers.
Yeah, that went to Denver and ended up having 1,000 yards. You could say one thing about Dallas in the late 90s. There was a lot of weird shit, but Chan Gailey knew how to just grab wide receivers and bring them in, and they would have really solid. Like this was the first time that Dallas would not have 1,000-yard guy, but would have like 5 guys all with 600 yards.
Which I would prefer.
Oh, yeah. Nowadays, we understand it. But back then, everybody's like, well, we need that lead wide receiver. You got to have wide receiver 1A.
That's why the concept of the triplets was so popular. You wanted a quarterback to get you 3,000. You wanted a receiver to get you 1,000 plus. You wanted a running back to get you 1,000 plus. And that was what everybody was modeling because they were trying to model the Cowboys. It's a very gimmick league. The NFL
always is. It's also a copycat league.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go to the one that I will admit this playoff win against Dallas is the most frustrating. That's not what we're showing now. We're showing Christmas Day. I'm sorry.
You're showing good times. Okay.
Hang on. That's what I was about to say. We got to hear this.
The Dallas Cowboys play Santa on this Christmas night. The tree is adorned with ornaments bright. If your holiday gifts have been quite enough, a Lone Star Kris Kringle still has more stuff. Unwrap that box labeled number 22. Emmitt Smith with the football is another gift for you. He scored 24 touchdowns in the Super Bowl drive. It's an NFL record if he gets 25. Tonight, you a believer, another...
By the way, Al Michaels is killing this open.
Yeah.
If y'all don't understand how much information he is spitting out we're at the point now where, hang on. Dude, we're 1 minute and 8 seconds in, and he is literally telling you the whole Dallas Cowboys season.
Yeah.
With a great, that's the thing they don't do now. And they don't have to. Nowadays, it's more like Jim Nets. You're looking at the Cowboys, and they're playing, they do it slower. But back then, it was get your intros in and get out.
The Pro Bowl awaits this great receiver. Tonight they will play for your eyes to see for home field advantage in the old NFC. These Christmas goodies should give you a reason to watch this final game of the regular season. Arizona Cardinals are the Cowboys' next test as St. Nick begins a well-deserved rest. Santa's job's done. His year is complete. Now he can watch these teams compete. The Cowboys continue their Super Bowl mission. It's Monday Night Football, a Christmas edition.
I want that intro back.
I think that was actually Frank Gifford.
I want
Whoa.
that intro back.
So
this was also, Emmitt Smith was trying to break the all-time rushing touchdown record,
which back then seemed like was going to be never matched again, and then it just kind of got matched. And I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize our Discord would be coming over. But what was bigger about this game?
So the 49ers, the day before, who were supposed to have the number 1 seed in the NFC, they got upset by Atlanta, who ended up making the playoffs because of their big 28-27 win over San Francisco the day before. San Francisco's 11-5. If the Cowboys lose in this game, they still get the number 1 seed. But if the Cowboys win, they get the number 1 seed.
And I did not know this, but apparently in the Atlanta locker room, there was chance of win this for Dion.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know. I did not know that until I actually meant to bring this up to you a couple months ago. I just was randomly watching one of the Dion things, and I think it was Tim McKyer was talking about. And I don't even think he was with Atlanta at the time, but he was just talking about people don't understand. Atlanta still hated San Francisco so much, and nobody on Atlanta hated Dion for what he did. So that's the one thing I want to say this right now. I know this is where it's going to be lost. Nobody's going to remember this, but when a player leaves for bigger money, nobody on his previous team blames him. They totally get it. And so you'll see fans be like, oh, I bet he's the hated guy in the locker room. No, he's not, because everybody's like, no, go get your money.
There's also the other thing of, so for those that are younger than 22 years old, you won't understand, or younger than 25. Before the team, before the current division format, where it's 4 teams in a division, Atlanta and San Francisco used to be in the same division,
and Atlanta was a thorn in their side.
It's weird thinking about it because Atlanta's East Coast, 49ers were West Coast, but Atlanta was slotted in the NFC West.
Well, and so was New Orleans.
And
in fact, if you looked at the old NFC West, you had San Francisco and the Rams as the big rival, and then Atlanta and New Orleans as the big rival. And sometimes that would cross. The Niners and the New Orleans in the late 80s had their thing, because you had Joe Montana versus the sack attack, or the dome sack patrol, all that. Ricky Jackson, Von Johnson, Sam Mills, maybe the best Pat Swilling, maybe the best pure pass rushing 3-4 linebackers, until you got Kevin Green and Greg Lloyd with Pittsburgh.
And great about Pittsburgh, as we were looking at, they had a run stuffing middle linebacker in LeVon Kirkland.
Oh, you mean 6'1", 472-pound middle linebacker that could go sideline to sideline like he was Robert Jones?
Yes,
he was special, dude. I'm joking, but he was special because he was big, but he wasn't fat. And it's the same thing with Larry Allen.
Rip.
Tyron Smith, those guys, they're big, but they're not fat.
Yeah, Tyron Smith had a 6-pack.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
LeVon. I mean, LeVon was bigger, but it's the same way. He could move.
Yeah.
You're right. It was weird. That was a weird time before they split things, rightfully so, into the South, the North, the East, and the West. But man, you got to admit, there was a time, at least for me, growing up in a town in East Texas where we got New Orleans football as much as we did Dallas. 87, 88, 89, the Rams and the Saints, and the Niners and the Saints. That was gay. And it was fun because I was rooting for the Saints, but it wasn't like diehard Dallas where I'm living with every down. I'm just watching the game and enjoying it. And I think that's where I started getting that love, where I sometimes just want to watch the game. Sometimes you and I talk about it. I love it when Dallas isn't playing at 3:00 on a Sunday. I love it when they're on Monday and you and I can just watch the Red Zone channel. In fact, we start kind of planning our hangouts when Dallas is either playing Sunday night or not on Sunday at all, so we can just enjoy the Red Zone and not have to deal with, oh God, is Dallas going to win this week or not?
I still got to make a decision on my Red Zone.
Go NFL.
Yeah, you did that.
$15 a month. You can put it on TV. It's fucking awesome, dude. Yeah. It'll be probably a little higher this year. They haven't announced the pricing, but I mean, I don't need all the other TV. Now, if you want the other channels, go Fubo or YouTube.
I did Sling last season, and I liked it a little bit.
Sling? Sling. Sorry.
I liked it, but it just was still too much for me.
And by the way, this is about how good this rivalry really was in the 90s for Dallas. There's one reason we have to bring it up. And I hate this.
Oh,
This is-
Arizona?
Yeah, this is literally, I will say this right now. Of all the Dallas losses that mattered, this is the one.
Okay.
1998.
Yes.
Playoffs. Dallas had dominated the Cardinals at home. They'd won on the road. I think that went into overtime, but they still won.
They beat every team in the NFC East.
They beat every first time ever to happen. And then think about that too. But then they host Jake Plummer and the Cardinals. But that Jake Plummer had a solid game. But what beat the Dallas Cowboys is the Cardinals had secretly been watching. I say secretly. They had been watching Cowboy film since their last loss, and they had figured out a flaw in their pass protection. And I got to watch a video from the Cardinals a few years ago talking about this game. And they were even talking about we figured we would get 2 drives and then they would figure it out. And so our hope was, hey, we're up 10-0 and we can just hold on.
Yeah.
And then they keep doing this blitz and the Cowboys aren't picking it up. And the Cowboys aren't picking it up. And the Cowboys never picked it up. And I think that this is the most humiliating playoff loss for the Dallas Cowboys over last year's Green Bay. The Green Bay team last year is a really good team. We can hate that they went into Dallas all, but that turned out to be that 98 team for Zona was not a good team. Minnesota showed it the very next week, thumped them. And so this was always to me, the hardest Cowboy loss.
Man, just was Chan Gailey calling the offense?
Yeah. I mean, that's what lost him the basically the job for the most part was.
Man, it just feels like just watching that game. I hate when coaches can't adjust.
Oh, I do too, dude. At least try something.
Yeah.
And you know what? And maybe I go back and watch that game and I see that they're actually trying something. It just didn't happen. But in the moment, it's like, oh, they're going to A-gap blitz. Clay Shiver's not going to pick it up. Oh, look what just happened. And it was just so freaking ugly. And it was just I said in the Philadelphia game that 2001 opener to me proved that the dynasty was dead. But I think that 98, and I know they responded back in 99. They started strong, 3-0. We all know that. Irvin gets hurt, but maybe it was the 98 Cardinals because it felt like that was the first time. I mean, they lost at home.
Yeah.
They lost at home to the Arizona Cardinals, who until they went on their little mini run in the late 2000s, that was their one and only playoff win on the road.
Yeah, after the 84 season, really for most of the 80s, they were 8-8, 7-9. They were somewhat competitive. But once they moved to Phoenix, they were not competitive. So from 88 to 98, they were really nothing. Nothing relevant. 93, 94 with Steve Berline, they were 7-9.
They were solid. They were teams that if you didn't pay attention, they'd beat you.
Yeah. But there weren't really much of anything to talk about until 98. And even then, it was they won some games. They got blown out in some. But yeah, it's just sad thinking about it because it's another one of those what could have been. Because Dallas, they had the 3 seed. If they had beaten Arizona, they would have went to, I believe it was Atlanta at the time. And then San Francisco would have went to Minnesota. Yeah, and just think of how that would have turned out because I think Dallas would have matched up well with the Falcons. But again, 26 years ago, who knows what would have happened? Maybe Jamal Anderson would have ran roughshod on the Cowboys.
Maybe. But again, the defense against the Cardinals were not bad. Now, but let's go back to this. We talked about it. Like I said, Kevin Williams had a big game, 200 and something yards. Yeah. Emmitt Smith broke the record, but more importantly. Jerry Maguire made a generation of fans think, I'm not joking about this.
I know.
A generation of fans who are football fans thought that Dallas lost this game because in Jerry Maguire, which by the way is a great movie. I got to rewatch it and see if it's a 90s movie. That's definitely going to be on our show eventually. But a lot of fans thought because of that movie that the Cardinals beat the Cowboys.
Yeah, this is the second time today we've referenced how a Cowboy, or not really, how a 90s game has translated into a movie. In 93, we talked about the Philadelphia-Miami game and how that was referenced in Ace Ventura as the Super Bowl. And here we're talking about the 95.
Oh, and Washington, Dallas, the replacements.
Yeah, in 87.
We brought that up, yeah.
87, Washington versus Dallas was the premise for the 2000 movie, The Replacements. And in here, Christmas Day, Arizona, or Cowboys at Arizona, last game of the season. This was the premise for the Jerry Maguire movie.
Yeah, and you know, first off, again, like I said, that movie, I need to rewatch it, but it was fun in that moment. Not only the sports side, but the other side. But I always remember we're at the end, you know, Jerry and I can't remember what Cuba Gooding's name is in the movie, but they're hugging and stuff. And Troy Aikman says to his real live agent, Lee Steinberg, man, I wish we had that kind of relationship. And Lee Steinberg tries to go in for a hug, and Aikman's like, no, we're good. Of course, Lee Steinberg, like a couple years later, cleaned out everybody's account as he was an alcoholic. He tried to run to Mexico. Yeah. Anyway, let's go to the last rival of the Dallas Cowboys in the 90s. And that, of course, is, I say, of course, that, of course, is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, they're the one team that, I guess technically the Oilers, because in 97, we didn't really bring that up when we talked to Oilers. In 97, on Thanksgiving Day, the 7-9 Jeff Fishers, they beat Dallas. And that kind of, it didn't officially knock Dallas out of the playoffs, but it was a symbolic thing in 97.
Yeah. Well, when we bring up the Panthers, we'll talk about what officially.
Oh, we didn't bring up the Panthers yet?
I don't think so.
Oh, crap. Let me go them. We'll go here first. All right. So, but Minnesota kind of crosses over because we talked about it in 1995.
6 days of Sunday.
Yeah, it was 95, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
95.
Yeah. So in 95, they did 6 days of Sunday, and that's where basically, and it's a really good thing. You can find it on YouTube.
It kind of spawned a lot of those special NFL shows now that
Hard Knocks, behind the scenes, anything like that. And you and I just recently watched it, like I think in this last.
Well, it took us forever, but we finally found a video on YouTube
that we could see.
Yeah,
we had found a couple others that was just really bad quality. I think it was the first of this year's season, like in the spring, back when the studio was over in the other room. I think that's what it was, and it still holds up because you see basically it's literally as soon as both teams' games the last weekend. In fact, both of them, it's the coaches talking to the other coach that they just played, and it just shows back how the Cowboys get ready for the game.
Everybody looks forward to Hard Knocks now.
And I hate Hard Knocks.
This show was mind-blowing in 1995.
Yes, because you couldn't fluff it because you only had 6 days. You had to show it. You also started seeing like how at that time Charles Haley was kind of an asshole in the locker room. Remember, that's when he's very he's kind of bullying and stuff. But it was just cool. You saw I really from that episode on, I loved Denny Knight. Because it showed him, he had his own little coach. All coaches have their show, but he played the drums if they won on his show. And it was he just seemed like a really good dude. Yeah. Like every time I think of him and then go, oh, fuck, he's dead.
R.I.P.
Same thing with Wayne Fonts.
Rasputin himself.
Yeah, Rasputin himself. He survived 3 straight years of, he's going to be fired. And then the Lions would win 7 in a row. And we love him. But yeah, I think it worked because you still like the Cowboys if you were a Cowboy fan, but you also, if you weren't a Cowboy fan, you saw that they were human, that they were fun and all that. And then you saw that other teams were fun as well. So anyway, this is the last play of that game because this was one of those games that Dallas probably should have won. If Jimmy Johnson was there, they probably went comfortably, but it was ugly. It goes into overtime, and then Emmitt Smith does what Emmitt Smith does.
Is going to start pacing the sidelines.
And apologize. The only video I could find of this was somebody recorded it off their phone.
That's right.
I mean, off their TV.
1st and 10 Dallas, 17-17.
First off, before 1998, when Cardinals abused it, why would any team say, hey, we're playing Emmitt Smith and Moose Johnson, that offensive line, let's blitz the A-gap? Because that's what just happened. And watch what happens when you blitz the A-gap against the Cowboys back then.
In overtime. Emmitt Smith, watch out. This could be over. Touchdown, Dallas.
So one of the things that people don't realize is when you go look at Emmitt Smith's game by game, team by team, he destroyed the Vikings. We talked about it even in that 99 playoff game where Minnesota ended up winning.
Yeah.
Dallas started out big because he had like a 60-yard touchdown. I think Dallas got an interception, and then he had like a 30-yard touchdown. And eventually they kind of ran Dallas down because, again, Dallas was struggling. But, yeah, Minnesota was one of those teams that he just had a lot of success with. And outside of the 96 playoff game, I just realized something. Outside of the 96 playoff games, every one of these games was in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Even in the 93, I think it was 93.
Yeah, it was in Minnesota. Yeah.
And they went out and kind of destroyed. Again, that was another game. It was ugly, but they ended up kind of stretching.
It was like 37-20.
Yeah,
like
but it should have been like 37-0. And it was just, I remember Jimmy being really mad about that game. But yeah, so anyway, that led to this. And of course, Minnesota was kind of a lot like the Lions where they were good, but never consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of went really bad. And then they got good again. And of course, that led to the Randy Moss becoming a Viking. Randall Cunningham ends over with the Vikings. Chris Carter, Robert Smith. What was the safety? Orlando
Thomas.
Yeah, I mean,
he passed away, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did. Why do you say these things?
I'm sorry.
So
and then Eduardo Tuoluo came out of the closet.
Wait, what?
One of their defensive tackles back in the 90s.
That's not the one that was shown here with the wife, is it?
You have to show me.
So on 6 days I don't have 6 days of Sunday, but if you don't remember, on 6 days of Sunday, that was one of the things. It was a Hawaiian player. No, he wasn't big enough. I think because he was special teams.
No, this was a defensive tackle.
Yeah. So he was.
Orlando Thomas died November of 2014.
What did he die of?
Let me look. Man, I didn't realize it was that long ago. Let's see. Thomas died of complications from ALS. Wow.
Oh, damn. That's what Steve Breeson had for the Saints. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't realize I had all the. Sometimes when you're editing, you don't really have what you have. So Dallas won that game, and then them in Minnesota. In '96 they played, and that was just an absolute
butt whooping. It made you think that
Dallas
the Cowboys,
was back. Yeah, they're fine. And again, I still contend if again Wesley Walls destroyed the defense in that game, and give Kerry Collins. Well, no, was that Kerry or Steve Berline? Yeah, Kerry Collins. Yep. Give them credit, but you kind of feel if Irvin doesn't get hurt.
It was the one good year of Anthony Johnson.
Oh yeah, he died too.
Oh,
wait, is he the one that died?
I don't know. I'm gonna look it up.
Oh no, I'm thinking of the one that got murdered.
Fred Lane.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Fred Lane. God, that was like 10 years later too. I'm terrible. Yeah. No, Anthony Johnson's still alive. Please just don't look it up. I don't even want to know if he's still alive or not. But it's been a long day, folks. But anyway, so we know what happened in '96. But then I think for Dallas, sadly, one of the most famous losses on Thanksgiving is this one.
Minnesota. And he is throwing it back to Cunningham, the old flea picker. And open is Randy Moss, and in the end zone is a Minnesota touchdown.
You know what? Okay, he's not going to do that 2 more times. The scariest thing about his stat line?
What?
That's the only 3 catches he had.
Oh, yeah, that was true.
Because they had Chris Carter on the other side. And what they did was beautiful. And again, Dallas fell into this trap. Slant Carter, Robert Smith, over the top. Now, what people don't remember about this game is the Cowboys' offense was really good. This was a fun game. I even admitted it after it was over. Like, God damn, I hate that they lost, but it's 46-36. I mean, what else do you want on Thanksgiving? If you can't get a win, you at least want a game that you're like, hey, that was fun to watch.
Yeah.
And you still felt like, hey, they're going to be okay. They're going to make playoffs, which they did. But yeah, so this began. I legitimately think this began the Randy Moss era in the NFL.
I don't know if Corey Stringer's on this team.
Yeah, I think he was. Florida State.
We are just getting into a very...
this could be a 7-hour show if we keep this up.
All the players that died on the 98 Vikings.
Wait, Corey Stringer's dead?
Yeah, Corey Stringer died like in 01, remember?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. The offensive lineman.
Yeah,
he famously died. He's part of the...
he was on this team. He played for Minnesota from 95 to 2000.
The supplement.
Let's see. Death at training camp.
Damn, the supplement.
Stringer suffered a heat stroke on the second day of the 01 preseason training camp and died on August 1st as a result of the complications.
Yeah, but he was taking Ephedrine. A Baltimore pitcher died of ephedrine as well. I took ephedrine back then.
Yep.
Yeah, I took ephedrine back then. It was called Mini Thins.
Mm-hmm.
And because he died and a Baltimore pitcher died, they outlawed it. But the problem is both of them were taking like 2 or 3 times the limit.
Oh, geez.
Like, yeah, ephedrine is just a thermogenic. It raised your heart rate. It was caffeine. It kept you awake. No dose. Truckers love it. There was all that back in the early 2000s. I lived off that. I ain't gonna lie. That's what got me through college. When I went back to college, because I was doing, like at Panola, I was doing theater. I was working full time, and I had a daughter, and I had a family. I was trying to, and then at Commerce, it was the same way.
Steve Belcher.
Yeah. Steve Belcher, and he died of ephedrine, Baltimore pitcher. Yep. And his wife is what, and I'm not knocking her for doing that. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But again, it was one of those things of if you'd have just accepted that, hey, they took too much.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in this game, it's famous. Thanksgiving, Cunningham hits Randy Moss on 3 catches, 3 touchdowns. And it kind of just started this thing where when Randy Moss played the Dallas Cowboys, he always had success. And it also started, I mean, this was the beginning of, this is a team that should have won a Super Bowl, not the Cowboys, the Vikings.
And 98 Vikings,
yeah. The fact that they didn't win a Super Bowl is a travesty. Because you can't say they choked because they played well in all the big games. It's just Randall Cunningham fumbled late, and then Gary Anderson missed a field goal.
Their only loss was to a really game Tampa Bay Buccaneer team on the road.
Oh, that's right. And that was the beginning of that Tampa Bay defense and Dungy. Dude, I totally forgot. It's so funny because when I was doing this, I was like, who was that first?
It wasn't even a fluke loss.
No, it was just a really good loss. It was like a 23-19 or something like that.
Yeah. And in the NFC title game, they played the 14-2 Falcons, who in any other year would have been hosting the NFC title game, but they ended up playing the 15-1 Vikings. So I think if the Vikings won, they would have ended up being the Broncos in the Super Bowl. That would have been John Elway's last game. Maybe Elway might.
Or maybe he comes back.
Maybe he comes back because that 99 team, let's assume Davis stays healthy, they would have destroyed the Rams in the Super Bowl. I don't think the Titans would have even made the Super Bowl.
So I don't know if this is a compliment or not. I said I think that loss to Tampa Bay was like 23-19. It was 27-24.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little scary. You know what would have made that better story though? The Denver Broncos beat the Green Bay Packers as they were going for what? Back-to-back.
Back-to-back. Yeah.
If Minnesota would have gotten the Super Bowl, and I agree with you, I think they'd have beat them because Denver's defense was okay, but not great. They would have beat Denver trying to go for back-to-back. That'd have been a fun little thread because I think the Vikings world changes if they at least go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't think you see them just completely collapse, but you can also make the case that Randall Cunningham had a last gasp. But I mean, Warren Moon stepped in and they, wasn't that bad.
I still think because, Randall Cunningham 99 wasn't the same as 98. I think he might have had an injury. And then Jeff George came in, got the hot hand. And, he was a really good quarterback for them that season. And in 2000, I think Dante Culpepper assumed the reins. But yeah, you just don't know. It's one of those we could do a look back on top 5 what ifs in NFL history, and we could just run the gambit on that, and that could be 3-hour shows. So,
all right, so now we're going to finish up with the Carolina Panthers.
So
now again,
this was the honorable mention to the honorable mention.
Yeah,
as I was going back and started to agree with you, I kept going down that rabbit hole. I was like, oh, the Carolina 96 and 97, those were so important.
But especially 96.
96 because that kind of ended the Cowboys' hopes of getting a 4th championship in 5 years. 97, that was the nail on the head. That's what ended the playoff hopes. And to me, that's what really officially ended the dynasty of the Cowboys in the 90s.
Yeah, and we can argue 98, even though they got beat by the Cardinals, and in 99 they started so well, 3-0. It felt like they were going to be right. But yeah, and that's the thing. You bring up a really good point that we don't talk about enough, that when a dynasty ends, it might feel like it's one moment, but usually it's 3 or 4, and usually it could be spread over 3 or 4 seasons. Yeah. And this was a game, you go back to if they don't have to play this in Carolina, if they play this in Dallas and
if Michael Irvin didn't miss the first 5 games of the season, causing them to be a 3 seed instead of a 2 or a 1.
And that's the thing people forget about. This is a team that started 1-3 and then got really good. But the problem was back like when in 98 when they beat all the NFC East teams, or in 85 when they almost beat all the NFC East teams. The problem was in 96 is once they started 2-3 with 2 wins over NFC East teams, the Giants and the Eagles, they then beat the Cardinals. And then they didn't win another division game except for the Cardinals later on. This was a bad Cardinals team. They lose to Washington. They lose to the Giants. They lose to Eagles. If they win one of those games, we're playing Carolina, a team just into the playoffs. Yeah. This is new to them. You're taking them into Dallas, and I think it's completely different.
You remember Dallas beat Green Bay and New England, the 2 teams that actually played in the Super Bowl.
I think they became the first team to beat both teams in the Super Bowl without also at least being in the Super Bowl, if that makes sense. We've had teams that beat a team in the Super Bowl and played them in the regular season and played the other Super Bowl team and beat them. But I think they were the first team to not make the Super Bowl and beat both teams. And they were ugly, especially that Green Bay game. We talked about that in the Green Bay. That's still one of my favorite wins of all time, simply because the whole Monday night, you talk about that 94 Lions, at 96, it was all, this is, the Green Bay Packers, they finally are here, and the Cowboys are not as good, and the Packers can't beat Dallas in Dallas, but today it changes. And they literally had, and I tried to find it, and I know I'm not crazy, but they literally had Brett Favre talking like, it's finally good to know we're about to get the monkey off our back. We're San Francisco of 94. We're about to get the monkey off our back. No, you're not. Chris Boniel's about to kick 7 field goals on your little ass.
Second time today we referenced Boniel.
Hey, we love Chris Boniel. Louisiana Tech, by the way. And you know what? He's now the athletic director of Louisiana
Congratulations
Tech.
to him.
No, I mean, he's been in like a couple of years.
Retroactively, congratulations to him.
You know what? I think we put a feather in this hat.
Dot on the I.
Dot on the I. And
cross the T.
Now, it won't show as far as when we put these up because this will go up first, but this is the official last recording of Outdrank the Coverage. You look back for season 2. Not only numbers wise, which by the way, like our Super Bowl last year, we were getting really good numbers. This year, blown out of the water. We're like over 150,000 views total, and we do appreciate that. But I think I think how we're doing the shows now, the streamlining and all, but also just I love the fact that we have a script. We just don't always stick to it.
Yeah.
That's what makes us great.
Yeah. I mean, you and I love this game. Like I had it up here, but I really didn't reference it that much. It's just fun, man. It's been a great season, great off season. Just looking back at season, our season 2 has been really good, and I can't wait for season 3.
And season 3 will be
Games with Names.
Name games. Games with, that's going to be the intro. Name games. Games with
We're going to
names.
argue on the title of it.
Dude, the funny thing is that's going to eventually be a long running series. Like I said, what we'll probably do next year is the same thing we've done the last 2 years, is focus on one theme.
Yeah.
After that, we kind of want to start having like that theme be one episode every year and all, but we're still trying to kind of foundation this show, so to speak.
And we still want to do the whole, shot in the fact scenario.
No, we're going to get there. There's so many things we want to do with this show, but we've got to get it to certain points. And when you get to those certain points, then you feel like, okay, now we can move forward. Speaking of, we want everybody to please check out our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/outdrankthecoverage, where you will get episodes before they go on YouTube. In fact, right now it's still free. It will stop being free on August 1st. So you'll get this one. The next one will have to be, but it's $5. And if you can't pay, we understand. Hey, in a couple weeks, it'll be on YouTube. We still appreciate that as well. We love the feedback we get on Facebook. We would like y'all to please start giving us some feedback on YouTube as well, simply because that's a big part of the YouTube ad revenue and things like that. Is it's not just numbers. It's also, if you interact, YouTube tends to send more brand deals our way. And so we'd appreciate that. But anyway, until next time, which will be what? The 29th, we're going to do a happy hour.
Yep.
We're going to kind of go back into random sports. By the way, our NFL preview shows will be happy hours as well.
Yep.
We'll probably do those back-to-back weeks just simply because of my other show commitments. But yeah, I'll be checking those out. Again, find us on YouTube at L4 Media Company, on Facebook, Outdrank the Coverage. And until next time, he's intern Noe the Pro. I'm Terry Bennett, and this has been Outdrank the Coverage, brought to you by Grandeur Pest Solutions on L4 Media.